national level and at global level as well. In these times of unimaginable deaths, we are learning once again how to live. We are confined to our homes, we are working from home, so on and so forth. And even 4 months down the line, 5 months down the line, when the virus was first uh, spotted in China, the signs of warning is far from waning away. Uh, Even the last night during his press conference, WHO chief said that we are far, far away uh, from this virus, and this virus is going to stay with us for a long, long time to come. There's a Harvard study which says that till 2022, we might have to live with the virus and also with the lockdowns on and off, if not continuously. Of course, that is not possible. Now, given the situation back home, before I come to that, globally, more than 7.5 millions are infected by this virus. And the last death toll that the number given by agencies are to go by, it has crossed 1.8 lakhs across the world. So US is topping the list. Europe is equally affected, especially in Europe. And the warning sign that WHO is giving is that Eastern Europe is in the initial stage of this virus unfolding in that area. So we are far, far away from any solution at the moment. Coming to India in particular, we have we will be completing a month of lockdown today, and we are into lockdown 2. Still, there are various factors that we need to weigh when we are discussing today in this webinar on urban response to COVID-19, especially in the context of India, if one can say. Obviously, lockdown 1 and lockdown 2 has slowed down the virus. The impact has been minimalized. The first case was detected on 30th of January, and in the last week of April. Yesterday, in the last 24 hours, we have crossed 20,000 marks, the number of positive cases. The number of fatalities have crossed 650. It stands at 652 at the last count. So obviously, a strict lockdown has paused the spread of virus, limited it. But what happens once the lockdown is withdrawn? Obviously, the cities have maintained a discipline, have stayed back home, but a country of 1.3 billion people, where the population density in areas like Dharavi, where per square kilometer you have almost 200,000 people living in within 1 square kilometer of area. How does one maintain social distancing? And similar is the situation. And we have seen how the city infrastructure generally, which is not so good, especially when it comes to sanitation, hygiene in urban centers, where there are a lot of migrants who are basically daily wagers, people who work without any contracts. So once this virus attacked these commercial capitals of India, Bombay, Delhi, Indore, and various Ahmedabad and various other places, a reverse migration started to happen, and we saw lakhs and lakhs of people on the streets trying to reach their homes because the job is no more there, the money is not more there. The government, though they are trying very hard to provide them food, shelter even, but that is not enough. Also, what we are reminded of is, if we look at the figures of last 4 days, it's a matter of concern. Concern in the sense that for last 4 consecutive days, the number of positive cases that have come into light has either crossed 1,500 or near about that. And the rate of fatalities every day is about 50 plus minus 2, something like that. So what is happening is that though the rate of doubling in places like Delhi and other states has gone up to 8 days, but in states like Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat, it is 4 days. So there is a not one linear explanation why it is happening. And the experts fear that the good work done by uh, several states and several hotspots, like we are talking about Bhilwara model, Agra model, Kerala model as a state, can be neutralized if we do not arrest the spread or the rate of doubling in states like Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and other places. So these are the questions that is in front of us, that how we deal with the unfolding situation. So we have a very, very esteemed panel with us in this webinar today, starting from Mr. Ravi Ranjan Guru, who is Deputy Director General of All India Institute of Local Self-Government. We have Mr. Tikendra Singh Panwar, who is former mayor of Shimla, Deputy Mayor of Shimla. We have with us Mr. Ranjan Panda, who is a well-known activist. We also have Mr. Edgardo Bilski, who is the director of research in the World Secretariat of United States and local government. We have two very, very eminent and senior journalists with us, Mr. Abhilash Khandekar and Mr. Ashok Wankere. Mr.
Hey.
Abhilash Khandekar is joining straight from Bhopal, very close to Indore, no, which is one of the hotbed or hotspots of this virus. Indore is obviously a financial capital of Madhya Pradesh. Mr. Ashok Wankere is a very eminent journalist with a varied interest, and of course you have seen, must be watching him on different television channels. He's a political analyst and he analyzes the situation. So to begin with, I will hand it over to Mr. Ravi Ranjan Guru for his opening remarks. Mr. Guru. Hello, Mr. Guru, can you hear me? Mr. Arun?
Yes, Ravi.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, please go ahead, sir. Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I think Guru has to unmute his mic. I can see that his mic is still muted.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes. Please go ahead now.
Okay. Great. Thank you. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar series on urban response COVID-19, organized by All India Institute of Local Self-Government along with ALG Aspect Urban Update. I would like to welcome all of you for this webinar series. As all of you are experiencing that the whole world are facing this pandemic situation, the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic is the defining global health crisis of our time and the greatest challenges that we have faced since World War II. Since it's emerged in China last year, the virus has spread to almost the entire world and cases are rising daily. like just mentioned by Mr. Dhananjay, that the numbers are increased like anything. In fact, India is also have seen number of cases has grown like anything in last few days and week. Uh, National governments world over have not seen such a serious health emergency, and COVID-19 has made its way to almost every corner. And this is not only the health issue and crisis, but this is also affecting the social, economical, and political situation across the globe. The whole world are understanding the long impact of COVID-19. I mean, this is not only going to impact at present, but the kind of impact after the COVID-19, maybe next 1 or 2 months is going to be another big impact on the economy and the other aspects. Cities are deserted as people stay indoor, either by choice or by government order. Across the world, shops, theater, restaurants, and bars are closed. Everyday economy is going down. People are losing their jobs and livelihood. Poor people are struggling for their livelihood and daily food. The International Labour Organization estimated that the more than 119 million jobs could be lost if it's persistent long. Many urban local bodies have also been caught unaware how to deal with such a situation, and that is unprecedented, and they are waiting for the instruction from the state or central government. And the whole world is looking towards the World Health Organization to control the situation on ground zero and suggest the measures. And the entire urban local bodies are clueless at the moment. As the cities across the world are locked down to slow the spread of virus, our health and sanitation workers, law enforcement agencies have thrown themselves into the fray as the first respondent. The role of urban local bodies also becomes imperative in ensuring proper communication with the local communities and guaranteeing equitable deliveries of basic services to all the citizens. Like there are some cases that we are hearing, like Mr. Dhananjay also mentioned about that Bhilwara model, Agra model. But I'll just highlight here another few other urban local bodies who has been doing good. Like Thane Municipal Corporation has formed a team of doctors to do a door-to-door survey to check if any person shows any symptom of coronavirus and geotag them for ease of identification. Uh, a host of corporations are conducting sanitization, disinfection exercise in key public places. Such activities have not been the part of ULB's operation in the past. The crisis can enable corporation to do a need-based assessment of their capacity, skill, and resources. Our corporation can also learn from the experiment of the various other municipal corporations in the world, and local leaders and the city networking organization have realized that the scale of this global crisis is unprecedented, and so is the scope of local government response. And I must congratulate and UCLG aspect team, who has been, I think I've been the part of many webinar where they are actually bringing these urban local bodies across the globe to share their experience, how the urban local bodies of China, Korea, Philippines, they are dealing these challenges, in fact, in European countries as well. And I'm sure that these webinars and these kind of activities are helping the urban local bodies to understand how these challenges can be dealt at the local level. I have certain example, the South Korea, which has set a good example by controlling the spread of disease. According to the information received from one of our partner organizations that work with urban local bodies in South Korea, the city of Seoul has been taking exhaustive and containment measures in the to fight against the COVID-19. Once a confirmed case is reported, the possible areas are being disinfected, the patient's movement is publicly disclosed to minimize further contact, and those who came into the close contact with the carrier are being tested and advised to self-quarantine. Moreover, the Seoul Metropolitan Government continues to closely monitor the development related to the virus in the city under the Virus Prevention Task Force operating around the globe. In the similar line, we do have such nice practices here in India as well. We have been listening the Vilwada model, Agra, etc. in dealing the present COVID-19 situation. In fact, there are certain states, like recently we have heard that Goa has been declared zero cases. Kerala also has done a quite good in controlling the present COVID-19 situation. The role of local communities and the local government becomes most important in responding to such a crisis. Many corporations in India and abroad have devised new ways to work hand in hand with the communities to build trust, spread authentic information on the disease, precaution, and support resilience and mental health. So with this background, ALSG is organizing this series of webinar to exchange the knowledge and share the experience among each other to deal the present challenges faced by cities across the world. I'm sure that today's we have a very good speakers and experts and panelists across the globe, and this going to be helpful for us to fight and deal the challenges that we all are facing. Thanks to all of you for joining this webinar, and I'm sure that this webinar's result will be helpful for all of us. Thank you. Over to Dhananjay ji. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, Mr. Guru. Thank you so much for all the information that you have shared with our participants and also the fellow panelists. Before I invite our next speaker, let me just tell you all that those who have not been able to join this webinar because of limited number of seats, we are streaming it live on our Facebook page. You can just log into your account and go to Urban Update Mag. Also, we will have a question answer session. You can write to us your questions, and please mention who the question is directed to, and we will certainly ask him. Now, let me invite Mr. Tikendra Panwar, who is a former deputy mayor of Shimla. Sir, over to you.
Thanks, Dhananjay ji. Just tell me how much time do you allot me to speak so that
Roughly 10 minutes, yeah.
Fine, great, thank you. So just give me a buzz around 9 minutes when I'm done.
Sure.
So thanks, Dhananjay, and thanks All India Local Self-Government, because I think it's such an important topic where we have seen countries, nation heads, and especially in India, our provincial government heads, chief ministers, but unfortunately, we didn't find not a single mayor we found dealing with the pandemic the way the chief minister is dealing. And I'll come to that. I mean, that is my focus where I want to really speak about. It's not the problem with the mayors. It's the problem with the overall structure of governance that we have built over the years in our country. And that's why we are so bad in handling this pandemic. Now, just before I come to the city governments and how they are facing, of course, we have some exceptionally good city governments that Guru was pointing out, from Kerala, Trivandrum, Agra, and all that. But I'll come to that also. But I think before that, Dhananjay, what is important for us, though I'm not a health expert, let me tell you. So I do, and you described all the health aspects of the pandemic. But though my wife is, and actually I take my wife's advice, and she says that, hey, you better start living with the virus for another year or so. So I take her words. I think we have to plan our trajectory according to that. We have to live with the virus, and we have to go on. And when I say we have to go on, I think our city governments have also to go on. But just try to ponder over, Dhananjay, why is it that when we just met in Goa a few months ago, we were fortunate enough, probably the last event that you were able to host. I don't think anyone else was able to host an event after that. But the point is, why is it that we were so obfuscatingly discussing things about sustainable development goals? Where is sustainability? All those sugar-coated words that we were discussing, look, 7 SDGs and whatnot, and our cities could not hold a migrant population just for 7 days. I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm not talking about the world. I'm talking about India per se. So I think that is what we wonder over. And if things are such And if we work with things as usual, I mean, if that inertia continues, I think it's a real holocaust in the offing. Now let's take a few points. Why is it happening? I think one is also to the kind of urbanization we are witnessing in the last 3 decades, 3.5 decades, where cities are considered more like entrepreneurs. This is what I was saying in Goa, and I would like to reiterate here. We can't expect cities are for the citizens, for the people. And the moment we transform this function of the cities to be city entrepreneurs, and I was just reading Stein's book of where he writes in Capital City, the real estate state. You will be amazed to know that in India, some of the cities, actually the primary accumulation of capital is taking place through real estate, not through production. And it has increased huge amount of inequity in the cities, massive. I mean, you can't just imagine. We have figures which are looming large. 80% of the people in the cities, I mean, the migrant people I'm talking about, they live on less than 7,500 rupees a month. Imagine what we are doing with our cities. And not just that, according to the World Bank, I think we have 450 million internal migrants. 45 crores, just imagine 450 million internal migrants. And where are we hosting them? What is the habitat that is there? 7 days they are unable to work. The first lockdown that was there for 21 days, and they had to migrate back. Let's go and just read the CMI data. I mean, that's scary. I'm telling you, if things do not, and why I say it's scary, not just because employment rate in the cities have gone up to almost 26%. It's fearing. I mean, it's really dreadful. But also because of the fact that the willingness to work, I mean, the second matrix that they have drawn has come down from, that population from 15 to 59. In that population, the willingness to work was somewhere around 68%. That willingness to work in the cities has gone down to 27 to 28%. People don't want to work. The moment you lift the lockdown, they'll go back to the villages because our cities are not sustainable. We are unable to sustain our cities. So that's the larger political economy we are talking about. And just go about, I mean, it's ridiculous to even speak about the kind of offers that are made by the government. I mean, it's a complete failure. You'll find the NGOs are running probably apparently more relief centers, and more food is being distributed than our national and provincial governments. What is this? I mean, what is this happening, I think? And 89% of the stranded migrants, they weren't paid wages at all. And 94%, I mean, all that we talk about, look, direct cash transfers, 94% of the construction workers, they were ineligible for these direct cash transfers. What do you do in such a situation? I mean, just, and I remember actually 2 centuries ago, one of my famous poets, P.B. Shelley, wrote, "Hell is a city much like London." And exactly a century after, we had what we call, I mean, some call it a Spanish flu, but the influenza that we had that consumed 25% of the people were affected, and almost 50 million deaths. It's a century after. I mean, whether these instances would be once in a century or they will be more repetitive. So, the pandemic is class neutral, but the system is not class neutral. And this is what we were discussing in Habitat 3. You just quoted the number of deaths, Dhananjay, and that comes to around 660. Just imagine 300 people have died because of non-COVID reasons. People were walking back, they died because of malnutrition, they died because of hunger. I think this has to stop. Of course, we have to restrict the virus. We have to stop Now I'll come to the whole issue. And the one more element that I would like to add. Also, because when I say the whole, we have to revisit, of course, it's a larger game plan that we have to think about in days to come. But I think if 94% of the cities the workforce is supplied to informal sector, then what do you make out of it? And it has jumped from 75% to 94% in the last 15 to 20 years. And just talk about housing. Professor Srivastava, I mean, if you remember his figures, he said, if you ought to ensure that the city remains sustainable as a habitat, then 25% of the housing must come from public housing. We have all these development plans, all these master plans that are come up, and the tragedy is that these master plans are not created by the cities. because the cities have been taken over by the parastatals. In Delhi, you have the Delhi Development Authority. In Mumbai, you have the Mumbai Development Authority. All non-political entities are deciding what politics is going to be. This is not sustainable. So the Professor Srivastava used to say 25% public housing. But in the last 6 years, we have gone down from 6% to 3%. I was teaching in School of Planning Architecture, where we have these surveys and all those. In the homeless shelters, why Kerala is a model? I'll come to that also. And why even Simla, for that matter, is a kind of model where that outward migration did not take place. I'll just cite that example. It has gone down. Public housing has gone down from 6% to 3%. And in Delhi, in all the homeless shelters I'm talking about, 95% of the people living in homeless shelters are not beggars. They're not homeless. They are actually working class people. They are the migrant people who stay there. So I think that holistic vision we have to understand when we are fighting this pandemic. Now coming to why we didn't, to the point where we started from. I'm not sure how it happened in Indonesia. Of course, we have the Seoul model. We have the metropolitan mayor. And I know Park Won-son is a great friend also. But the point is why we did not witness a similar situation. For the simple reason, let us understand our disaster management authorities. I remember when I was serving the city in Simla, we were able to create and identify our vulnerabilities even at the ward level, from city below to the ward level to the household level. And that's how we created a Shimla Atlas to measure the disaster and then to create our strategies for disaster mitigation and adaptation. Now, it's a very interesting thing. Why I'm bringing it to the fore is because many cities have done it, and it's what we call the CDMA. So you have a National Disaster Management Authority, you have a National Disaster Management Plan of Action, you have a State Disaster Management Plan of Action, and then you have a District Disaster Management Plan of Action, and you have a City Disaster Management Plan of Action. All the plans except the City Disaster Management Plan of Actions have been ratified. It means that when a disaster strikes, despite the fact that you create a plan with people's participation, but when a disaster will strike, be it natural or be it the kind of pandemic we are witnessing right now, the city government would be completely aloof because that CDMA is not ratified. Where are our mayors? Where are our councillors sitting? They're probably locked in their homes, whereas they should have been in the forefront, like our sanitation workers are, like our health workers are. But because they are completely disempowered, who is the empowered? The empowered structure happens to be either your deputy commissioner, the district magistrate, the city government is completely aloof. I think we have to revisit their strategies. Why? For the simple reason, I don't know how many of you are aware, but in Simla, the local legislator, of a region close to Simla city, had to sit on a dharna outside the district magistrate office for 30 hours to ensure that food is delivered to the migrant workers. This is the precarious condition. And of course, then the food. Why? Because had the councillors been part of that planned strategy to combat this pandemic, at least, I'm not sure how many people would have died, but at least people wouldn't have died because of hunger. People wouldn't have migrated outside. And why I'm saying the Kerala model, I think you are aware of the fact that when the affidavit was filed by the Ministry of Home Affairs and the Supreme Court, they said of the total relief camps that are functioning in the country, 65% of the relief camps are in one state, that is Kerala. And the city governments, take for example, Trivandrum city government, they're running continuously, they are running their kitchens, the community kitchens that they say. And of course, they have been, I don't want, because as I said, I'm not a health expert. They have really been able to chase the virus. They worked on the model of the Chinese model or the Korean model. And now it's become a model for the rest of the country and even for the rest of the world that you can do it. But the city governments were also taken into confidence, not through the structure that I'm discussing about the CDMA stuff, but still they were able to, and actually they were able to restrict the pandemic, and also not a single non-COVID death has occurred in Kerala, because that's the way. And why also Simla? Because 100 years ago, the Britishers constructed labor hostels here. What a migrant worker require in the cities, Dhananjay, is not a house, because the migrant worker can't afford a house. I mean, you know that. If one is getting 7,500, they require labor hostels. They require rental housing. I think we'll have to revisit. We'll have to revisit, else what the CMI report is suggesting it's a really scary situation. Even if the lockdown is lifted, I'm telling you, mark my words, people are not going to stay in the cities. They're going to rush back to their villages. And this reverse migration is extremely, extremely dangerous, because earlier they migrated from the countryside to the cities. Because of distress migration, our agriculture was in real crisis. And if they go back to the countryside, we do not know what is going to happen. I think with that, I would like to hear more about, but just to give a passing reference to what actually is, and the vision that I come from, or the political thought that I'm not suggesting a socialist market economy right now. What I'm saying is, even in the given political order, take for example what we spoke about, the decent city work. I mean, the decent work city, the Seoul Declaration. Why can't we have similar declarations in our cities? A Seoul Declaration is a fantastic declaration where a tripartite kind of arrangement takes place between the city government, the labor unions, and the entrepreneurs. I think that is what we have to revisit if we have to ensure that the working people come back to the cities. Because earlier I was very optimistic, and in all the webinars I said, no, the cities are going to bounce back. But now, going by the CMI report, I think I really put a caution at that. Also, because when I say a decent city work, because what is the real situation? 82% of the people who work in the cities, they don't have any written contract. 77.3% complain that they do not get wages and holidays. And 85% workers, they said, of course, I quoted that, less than 7,500. And what do you do, Dhananjay, with these app-based workers? These Zomatos, tomatoes, potatoes, all those things who are running these cabs, what do you do with them? They have no house. They were working in shifts. If you have to ensure that they still work in the cities, and the cities have to be vibrant. After all, we all know, I mean, I don't want to go into the philosophy why this migration used to take place for a better quality of life, better employment, education, healthcare. But if we are losing that, and we are not revisiting and I would like to end with the words. I mean, my favorite John Claus in Habitat 3 said, "Hey, we have to go back to the basics of planning. This whole business for laissez-faire, pandemic is going to kill, definitely. We know that. So we have our health, we are building our health infrastructure, but non-COVID deaths are also increasing in India. And I think that's a really serious challenge, which probably we are not really looking at. And just 1% of the GDP, imagine Malaysia, Indonesia are spending some 16% of the GDP to come out of the crisis. India with 1% of the GDP in such a large nation, what do you expect? And I think bringing the cities to the fore, making them champions, empowering them, building the disaster management plan of actions, ratifying the CDMAs, empowering the mayors, empowering the councils. I think with that, I would like to hear more of our friends there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tikendra Panbu, for your, it's always a pleasure to listen to you on migration and urban issues with your thoughts. Now I would like to invite Mr. Itkaro Bilski, who is Director of Research in the World Secretariat of United Cities and Local Governments. He's joining us straight from Spain. Over to you, Mr. Bilski.
Thank you very much. You hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay. If I may, I will share my screen, then you can follow my presentation. Do you see it?
Yes.
Do you see?
Yeah.
Very well.
Yes, we can see it.
Then I will try to bring to the debate what is the vision we have at the world level from the World Secretariat of UCLG. As you know, our headquarters are in Barcelona, even if we have sections, and UCLG ASPAC in Jakarta is one of the main sections of UCLG. At the global level, UCLG was very much active, and ASPAC in particular in the region, as you know. Let me summarize, first of all, what we see. We begin for the very beginning, that means from the mid of March, very beginning for Europe, to mobilize all our membership to try to collect and exchange informations regarding the experience, how cities are answering and facing this crisis. As you know, cities have not the same powers, resources, and capacities to respond to the COVID-19 crisis in general. as the previous speaker said, the situation in cities in India is very much different for other countries on the world. And I will try to bring you what other cities, how cities and local authorities in other countries, in other sectors of the world, are trying to give, to bring to the debate. First of all, even if in many countries the pandemic is handled by central governments, some countries have facilitated coordination and gave local governments more flexibility and resources to respond to the crisis. Others are looking, however, others are looking to reduce transfer and centralizing key decisions. Nevertheless, what comes out is that good coordination is critical to develop the more adapted response to the local situations and provide updated data. In many countries, however, local governments are facing insufficient coordination, limited human resources and equipments to ensure tests, provide masks and protective kits. Then what you see in your screen now is a summary of how local governments in different regions of the world are trying to answer to the crisis. First of all, how they build a coordination units to respond to the crisis. For example, in Jeonju, you have the safety countermeasure headquarters, or in Philippines, the Task Force COVID-19 and Barangay Health Emergency Response Teams. In general, the answer from local governments to the different situations was, first of all, information, disclosure information in some countries, in some cities, websites and digital platforms, messaging systems, creating one-stop database, live Facebook sessions, multilingual posters, campaigns, and use the city community centers to disseminate and inform the population. These information are coming from cities from everywhere in the world. I am summarizing what many cities are doing. Regarding mitigation, first of all, it was the closure of schools and events, postpone of events. In Korean cities, the famous drive-through COVID-19 testing facilities, then temperature checks implementation in many city points, particularly, for example, in China cities, and confinement that go for full confinement to partial confinement. In general, the main preoccupation, the main objective of local authorities is to ensure the continuity of public services, ensuring teleworking and flexibly working hours for the workers, for the employees, social distancing and protection, regular disinfection of public services. Regarding the social dimensions, first of all, one of the main decisions in many cities were to avoid any eviction, postpone rental payments, ensure access to the services. For example, in Detroit, in the USA, where people that cannot pay bills have not access to water, they reopen the access to water. Helping fragile and isolated population, first assistance of elderly, expanding shelter capacities for homeless and migrants, creation or expansion of food banks and relief, particularly issues protection of women against violence, as this situation is creating difficult situation at home in many cases, psychological social support, and basic disaster incomes. Many cities, like for example in Barcelona, the cities are moving to develop some basic income for people that have not any income. Regarding the contentions, first of all, expansion of health services, digital application to monitor self-isolated patients, alternative accommodation for people positive tested. For example, here in Barcelona, the municipality used the hotels that were closed to bring people that come out for the hospitals but need still a period of recovery. Then transformation of public space into large care rooms. Regarding the support of economic activities, modification of administrative procedures to facilitate any procedure, consulting offices for example, local economic crisis advising groups, subsidies for small and medium and micro enterprises, postponed taxes, mutual aid funds, or emerging financial support. In any cases, like in New York, zero interest loans. That give you is not a full and extensive mapping of cities are doing, but that's give you a flavor how cities are responding to the crisis in different countries of the world. With regard to UCHPAC, as probably you know, UCHPAC is collecting smart practices on COVID-19 from cities and provinces for Korea, for China, for Philippines, for Indonesia. They launched in beginning of March, they launched a call for support to people enjoy the global response to COVID-19, particularly for China's people. And they are organizing regular exchange or regular webinars on LG actions. On March, they organized until now three sessions, regular sessions, and the next one will be on April 23, actions to mitigate the economic impact of COVID-19 in Asia Pacific. Now, I invite you to move to the global, really global approach of our organization regarding the answer to the COVID-19 crisis. First of all, from the 24th of March, we create this platform, Cities for Global Health. Our metropolitan section, Metropolis, us and a group of experts, created this platform where you can find now more than 300 experience from cities from all over the world, have they answering to the crisis, 71 cities and in 28 countries. We also organize webinars, what we call live learning series. The first one was organized on March 25, and we were surprised for the participation of mayors. More than 200 mayors, representatives of UN agencies, representatives of cities and experts come together to discuss the first answer to the crisis. And they decided to organize this, all the subjects that you have here, that mean public services, housing, how cities are responding to the crisis of housing, on mobility, on the role of local government associations, the use of technologies, migration, how cities are supporting immigrants in their cities, particularly irregular immigrants, the use of culture to support people down, and finance, informality, and local economic development. All these subjects were discussed in this first exchange in this forum, and all these forums that are organized weekly mobilize more than between 100 and 200 representatives. I forget to say you that these sessions are open by the executive director of UN Habitat and the Secretary General of UCLG. On the other side, we are now launching what we call an emergency transition monitoring. This is a joint initiative of UCLG Metropolis and London School of Economic Cities. We are going to produce an analytic note and a policy brief every month, every 2 months, to map how cities are answering and how cities are overall recovering, what's coming after the crisis, the aftermath of the crisis. And this is, we try to illustrate how cities can prepare themselves for the crisis that it comes, social crisis, economic crisis, that will come after the health crisis. Finally, to conclude, this is one of the principles that our presidency discussed just this week as recommendation, as support, as what we call the Decalogue for the post-COVID-19 era. First of all, as you will find normally, guarantee the continuity of public services, implement a financial support package, develop proximity models of consumption and production, and the use of technology to face the crisis, promote worldwide Green Deal. That means don't forget the environmental crisis when you propose recovery measures, foster new citizenship and ensure rights for the people, particularly for women and girls, reduce inequalities between the migrants, the minorities, and all ethnic groups, protect public servants, support culture as a lever for social creativity and respect of diversity, even within the crisis, and particularly within the crisis, strengthen the links between urban and rural areas regarding just what it was mentioned before, that means that many people of cities, particularly migrants, are going back to the rural areas, how we can use that to strengthen the solidarity and support between rural and urban areas, and create a more balanced interurban system, at the global level support multilateralism. Thank you very much. I am ready to answer any question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bilski, for sharing your thoughts and the efforts made by local governments and the global cooperation that is taking place between various local governments. Thank you very much. We'll come back to you with questions later. Now we are joined by Mr. Souvik Datta from European Union. He's a senior program manager at European Union. We all know that Europe has been badly bruised by this virus, especially Spain and Italy have paid a huge price. There are countries like Germany who they have managed to control the spread of the virus, but almost every country, little or at a larger level, has been affected. So what has been the European Union's response to COVID-19? Mr. Souvik Datta will talk about it. Over to you, Mr. Datta.
Hello, hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, briefly, I mean, we have been working over the past 1 or 2 weeks actually to gather resources and respond to the COVID-19 pandemic in India and Bhutan, because that's what the EU delegation in India does. Most of its program is in Bhutan, but we do have a lot of projects in India as well, mainly with civil society organizations and organizations like All India Institute of Local Self-Government. So this is basically in India. Now our priorities have changed over the years, considering that India has moved to a middle low income country. So basically the approach is also different. We are now working with the development banks. So we provide assistance to the development banks to implement projects out here. It's a modality called the blending, where we provide the grant components, and the development banks they leverage the loan component. So this is one way of doing it. So we have been working extensively with the AFD out here, the French Development Agency in India, and we are considering a number of proposals that they have submitted to us for the COVID-19 response. In addition to it, we are working with the civil society organizations out here, the existing programs. Many of them have come forward requesting to use some of the existing project funds for COVID-19 response. So we are, trying to see whether these are possible, considering most of the programs, like many of them are working in the local authorities or urban local bodies. So mainly like provision of food, protective equipments like masks, and also sanitizers and things like that. So the best we can do, we are trying to do within the existing resources. Overall, globally, the EU has sort of committed around 20 billion euros for the COVID-19 response. So that is the EU's response globally. As far as the fiscal stimulus, because Europe is very badly affected, I think the EU has also put in around 500 billion within the Europe to as a fiscal stimulus for the countries worst affected. Besides this, I was also mentioning to you that we are supporting Bhutan. So we have a lot of programs. I would say around close to 60 million euros with government of Bhutan. So some of the resources we have already, like we have programs for on the local governments, improvement, capacity building of the local governance, and also on the renewable natural resources, agriculture, and things like that. So basically, we have recently released around 8.5 million to the government of euros to the government of Bhutan, and we have asked them to use this money for their COVID-19. I mean, they could use it for their basically the fiscal gap that has been created as a result of the pandemic. In addition, we are also planning to release a further more 12 million to Bhutan in the coming few months, mainly on COVID-19 response. So we have planned programs in the pipeline, which we are trying to speed up or quicken the process, so that by end of this year they will get a further 12 million euros. This is basically what we have been doing over and as we speak, I am also trying to uh, sort of gather some more information so that we can have uh, some responses for this approach or to the response to the COVID-19. Interestingly, in Bhutan, we are also going to support the civil society organization out there. It's very regulated in Bhutan, the civil society organization. Very few uh, civil society organizations are there, and the capacity also is limited. So we are also trying to support the civil society organizations through the Helvetas, and mainly it's community awareness on prevention and protection, the service provision, uh, contribution to the critical areas of preventive initiatives by the government health facilities, things like that. So whatever limited um, activities and support is possible, we are trying to provide through our support, and hopefully uh, we will be able to support more. Incidentally, we are also supporting the World Bank and the IMF, IMF's regional program. So we are supporting the technical assistance to government of Bhutan through IMF and World Bank. So in a way, through them also, through these assistances also, how best the government can respond to the crisis is what we are trying to find out. So this is what I had to say as EU response to COVID-19 in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Datta, for sharing your thoughts with us and all the participants and attendees in this webinar. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Ranjan Panda. Ranjan Panda is a sociologist by education and has more than 2.5 decades of experience facilitating several initiatives, starting from grassroots to national level. Uh, he would be talking about there are several challenges that comes with COVID-19 and emanating associated challenges in the cities, those who are struggling and fighting with COVID-19. Ranjan, over to you.
Hi, thanks, Dhananjay. Thanks, friends at All India Institute of Local Self-Government for organizing this very important webinar. I think you all are doing fine. You are safe. All the people who are joining this webinar, I wish them good luck, and I hope they're staying home, staying safe. Please take care. I think I would like to discuss basically two aspects here. One, as Dhananjay said, some of these challenges basically and how to cater to them. Basically, as we see from the very unfolding of this, I would say, disaster, we have sort of very frighteningly encountered something that we had been warning, and uh, and of course nothing much was being done. That is how our cities are being built. uh, I think just right now, while we are on this webinar, I just happened to saw something by the great Ratan Tata statement. He has warned, basically he has sort of warned the architects and city planners for having been actually built the slums and the workers as residues of development. So I think that is a very pertinent statement at this moment to, and what Tekinder has already said is that something that we have made our cities are like islands that are either somewhere in the moon, as if they are not inside the country, and within the city we have actually built sort of, at least if I don't go further details depending on the time, then we have made two worlds. So one world, as already Tekinder and others have said, is basically the world that doesn't belong to the city. That's the informal city. So they are distressed, or they are out of distress or out of aspiration. They have actually left their villages. They have come to serve the cities, the migrant laborers, or even when people who are settled also, they're as good as migrant laborers because they cannot afford to stay in a city unless the economy actually provides them the job on a daily basis. So that is one section, that is the city, and we can see that we have miserably failed them in this fight against COVID. The other part of the city, starting from the middle class to the upper class, I think their fight against this disaster is much better. I would say everybody under lockdown is not feeling good, but then the fact that you have a shelter, you have a roof, you have water supply, you have electricity, you have internet, and you have groceries still running for you, medicine shops still on for you, sales available for you. So I think that is one city. The other city is still walking on the streets. I think yesterday only we saw this pathetic news of a 12-year-old girl who just after walking 3 days, she died just before reaching her, just an hour before reaching her village in Chhattisgarh. So it's part of such residues of development as Ratan Tata has said right now. So I think we have never counted these people as members of the cities, as citizens of the cities. And that is where I think we need to discuss a lot, whether this kind of development that we have actually facilitated so far, ever since the new economic policy regime started in India, at least since early 90s, have we really been able to develop something that we call a real inclusive city? I'm sure most of you will agree that no. So our sustainable development goals, for example, like while one part of the city has water supply, the other side is actually do not have that luxury. So all our fight, one of the major frontline that actually is against COVID is to have access to water. because we are being asked to, wash our hands as frequently as possible, meaning almost, spending more for 30 to 40 liter of more water per person per day. If we actually adhere to the WHO and other norms of washing our hands, then having a soap, having hand wash, all this is a luxury that actually most of these informal cities, they don't have. Of course, many cities, many governments are have responded. They have started helpline numbers for water scarce areas. Water is being supplied, but then still, looking at the lockdown restrictions and all, these are challenges that these people face the most. So that is, I would say, that is one side of my presentation, is how to build actually a city that doesn't discriminate. And now social distancing that we say, actually this is something these people have been actually uh, experiencing discrimination. So this discrimination has to end, and this is a learning that the cities now should take, that actually you cannot distinguish between two kind of citizens. So if these are citizens, they are citizens, and their sacrifice to build your city, the migrant workers, is as important as the other people who are actually earning the money for you, and then then distributing to the other section. So I think this is a challenge. This is something that should stir up our mind at the moment, and we should learn from this disaster. The second aspect, I would say, is we should learn from the kind of public health facilities we have. I think that is a major challenge. The kind of privatization of health services that has happened, and the kind of facilities that we have generated is out of reach for many most of Indians. And public health facilities have simply not been up to the mark to face any kind of challenge. I salute the doctors, the nurses, the other health personnel for actually fighting this at the front line for all of us. But then I also salute them more because they have been doing this without a lot of facilities that should normally be available to them. So that is the second thing. Now our cities and also the rural areas should understand that only health insurance schemes are not going to actually help us in this kind of disasters, and which is of course going to be very frequent, and their intensities are going to grow like our other climate induced disasters. So our public health facilities have to be very, very solid, very strong, and they should be accessible on an equitable basis to almost all the citizens. I think that is the second lesson that we should learn from this. The third thing, and one of the happier aspects of COVID to a person like me, is that Earth has actually got a breathing space. I think we are happy that videos are coming from across, photos are coming from across, that wildlife has actually taken over streets, rivers are flowing healthy, they are very clean now. Even a very latest report from the Pollution Control Board and another government body says that almost more than 90, most of the river stretches in the Ganges are actually now fit for drinking. So I don't know that the report can be challenged because still urban sewer and waste is getting into the rivers. But then the very news that we can see Namami Ganga could not do for so many decades, or the Ganga action plans, this COVID has done in a month's time. So at least we are happy that the rivers are flowing at least a bit. Like news have come from Bangalore, news have come from all across India, all across the world, that the rivers are now a bit happier. The same thing with our carbon dioxide emission, our nitrogen oxide emissions, the pollution level. Almost more than 90 cities have actually recorded very low level of pollution in India. Throughout the world, cities have recorded low levels of air pollution, and the greenhouse gas emissions across the globe. Like China itself, uh, in the first month of lockdown itself, I think from 13 January when the lockdown started in Wuhan, uh, by 25th February, NASA images only said that almost a quarter of greenhouse gas emissions from China was gone. So I think China being contributing almost 27% of global greenhouse gas emissions, if a quarter of their emissions has gone, then it's a good news for Earth. I think we have to capture this learning into our city planning at this moment. Like for people like us who have been telling that make cities actually grow along with the greeneries, along with the water resources, not at the cost of them, is something that COVID has come back to us and say within this 1 or 2 months or 4 months that actually, like scientists have already said that if such a situation continues, like most of the speakers also said, the lockdown continues in different forms, of course, then will actually our economic slow will continue to be there. Our air traffic will continue to be on a very muted mode. Transport is going to be affected. Of course, the economy is going to be affected in different ways. But then the other side of it is that total GHG emissions might be reduced by almost 5% in 2020 if things like this actually continue. That's what experts have already said. That means a reduction that is not seen since the World War II. The same with all the pollution levels that we see now. So I think this is something, I'm not happy that there is economic slowdown, but then I'm happy that this is something that we learn from, that we know that the kind of economic growth model that we have actually, like Tikender was saying, that the money that is being made is from real estate and not from something that is more, and that is more divisive, that is not inclusive. So I think that is something that is inclusive, not among the humans only, but also that takes care of all the other species. Like for example, we have almost within the last 35 years, the human race has already extinguished more than 60% of the other species. So I think, and to be very honest and to be very specific to all the studies that have been done, I think one of the major reasons for increased pandemics like all the flu, all this kind of COVID, is also because we have destroyed the ecology. That has made more and more vulnerabilities coming our way, and that has actually also reduced our capacity to cope with them. So I think this is something, this should give us an opportunity to think, look back, to pause, and to redesign, I would say rather completely revamping the kind of economic growth model that we are following, not only in the cities, but everywhere. So I think the city governments, the municipalities, they don't have a much of choice, of course, because many of the decisions are taken somewhere else. But then they could start rethinking. They could, like smart cities, for example, should not be all about developing concrete infrastructures that, as people like us have been telling. So they could be inclusive in the sense that the poor is also a part of the city in a dignified manner with all the facilities, even though his or her earning is much less than the rich people. But then some of the basic amenities, like I said, the healthcare, the food security, the water and sanitation, hygiene security, the medical facilities, these are certain things that should be the same for everybody, no matter how much money in money terms someone earns. So that is one way. The other way is you have to have your urban forests, you have to have your water bodies, you have to have your rivers, rivulets, lakes, everything protected if you actually want an all inclusive and a real kind of a development that is also that also gives you the strength to fight against this kind of pandemics, which I'm sure is not the last. So we should be prepared for that. So my message for everybody, not only to the city planners, but also to the governments, to the civil society out there, to all the other people, is that please consider that nature as a partner in your growth, rather the major partner. Human beings are not everything, and they can determine everything. And if they start determining, being selfish, then everything that you have earned all your life, destroying the nature, destroying all other species, you are going to spend on fighting one pandemic just within few months. So choice is yours. Either you are with nature, or where you are being drowned by a pandemic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rajan, for showing the mirror to everyone that what needs to be done in the long run. I'm happy that Dr. Shashank Oza from World Bank is joining us. He's a senior digital development specialist at the World Bank. But before I invite him to speak, I would also like to welcome Chief Municipal Officers from Saharanpur, Ghaziabad, and Meerut who are joining us at this webinar. And also, I would like to share this that as we speak now, there is a live streaming of this webinar on Facebook, and currently more than 700 people have been reached, and they are watching it at the moment. Mr. Shashank Oza, Dr. Shashank Oza, over to you, sir.
Hello, Ravi, I will not be able to join. My neck bosses are about to. So I'll join that in 5 minutes.
I think Shashank Oza ji is not here, so he might join later on.
Okay, so yeah, we will wait for him to join back. So I would like to now invite Mr. Abhilash Khandekar. He's a senior journalist with more than 30.
Dhananjay, you have to unmute.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. I would like to invite Mr. Abhilash Khandekar, a very senior journalist with more than 30 years of experience in the field. He's joining us straight from Bhopal, capital of Madhya Pradesh, which is one of the worst affected states in the country, and especially Indore, which is one of the hot spots, and the number of deaths are really going up every day at an alarming level. So he will be basically talking to us on the impact on urban life in the affected cities. Over to you, Mr. Khandekar.
And I would like to confine myself to basically 4 issues from Madhya Pradesh as well as the neighboring state of Maharashtra. One is about the health issues, what is happening in Indore and Bhopal because of the sudden outbreak of this pandemic, and the dimensions are all well known to us. The second point is about demographic issues, of which some of them have been touched by Tikender, about the urban-rural divide and what is happening to bigger cities like Delhi and Bombay, or maybe Indore and Bhopal, and not to the rural areas. And the third is about the post-COVID scenario, as well as jobs and the migrant labors. But first, I would like to say that in Indore and Bhopal, there were 2 different approaches adopted by the local administration, which also was supported by the municipal officers, because in Madhya Pradesh there is a typical situation where there was no health minister until yesterday. There
Hello. Oh, Janab.
What happens? We don't hear anymore.
Hello, hello, Mr. Khandekar.
I think he has to mute your mic. Abhilash, you have to unmute your mic. Your mic is in mute.
Okay, Mr. Khandekar, can you hear me? This is Dhananjay here.
I can hear you. But can you see me? Yeah, I can see Dhananjay. Could you hear me before?
Yes, sir, we
Hello.
can hear you. We can see you also. Please start.
Dhananjay?
Abhilash Khandekar ji, we can see you. We can listen to you. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, Abhilash ji, please go ahead. We can hear you. I think Abhilash has some internet issue. Pratik,
He has to unmute again, I think.
yeah, please, Pratik, get in touch with Mr. Abhilash Khandekar. Meanwhile, let me go to Mr. Ashok Wankhere. As I had mentioned earlier, that he is a senior journalist, and every day you must be watching him on one or the other channel. He is a political analyst, analyzes the policy interventions by the government. So let me invite him to speak now on policy interventions and coordination between three tiers of governments in India. Over to you, Mr. Ashok Wankhere.
Do you hear me?
Yes, I
Dhananjay?
can. Loud and clear, sir. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone, all the people, prominent speakers on the panel, and all viewers. Let me welcome you on behalf of Urban Update. I'm managing editor of the magazine, and thanks for joining us. Dhananjay, he has tossed me a question, and let me put it straight on that. If at all we talk of coordination, let me be blunt to say that it may not go well with everybody. But there is absolutely, I hardly find any coordination between the state, the center, and the local bodies. We talk of local bodies. Our friend from Shimla was very clearly, he has spelled it out, that what really our local bodies have rights. Are they taken into confidence? Let me tell you a small example of Maharashtra. I think Abhilash ji also wanted to speak on Maharashtra. The Maharashtra government happened so, the cabinet minister, the prominent cabinet minister Nitin Raut, had to complain to the chief minister that whatever decision he has taken at Nagpur, being the in charge of the district, in charge minister of the district, they were overruled by the chief secretary. And he had to complain to the chief minister, it is my constituency, it is my district, I know what are the problems here. And let me address the problem at my level. Why somebody, a senior officer from Mumbai, has to fiddle in and make things worse. This is what happens when we go for a disaster management. In India, generally, disaster management, we look for cyclones or earthquakes or floods. This type of disaster, I think for the first time, not only India, the entire world is facing. What exactly, I think it has also given us a chance to teach, learn something from all these things. What we need to really address, we talk of various models, and Dhananjay, I think you are the better person. When we organize Urban Update throughout India in various states, you find every city has a different problem. Every city has a different solution to tackle the problem. The problem of water in Karnataka and the problem of water in Madhya Pradesh or Assam has to be dealt separately, because the character of the people there, the nature of life, the lifestyle of the people, the geographical, the topographical speciality of the every place. So it need to be. We talk of Kerala model, but see the education level in Kerala. You hardly have a news from Kerala where people have beaten up the doctors, or the police had to beat up the people not to come on the street. Once they are told lockdown, it is lockdown for them. In North India, we have to force the lockdown where people have accepted the lockdown. This is the difference. Kerala is a smaller state. Kerala is known for its cleanliness already. We have and in what happens in North, how it is there, what are the problems, we all know. Somebody was talking about these the cleanliness of rivers. It is always blamed that the 90% of the pollution is from the cities and 10% from the industries. But what we have seen, the 10% what comes from industry pollutes 90% of the rivers. Today all industries are closed on the bank. The cities are still pouring up the dirt, but even then the water is clean. That shows that there has to be, the problem has to be tackled somewhere else. It has taught us so many things. I think we also need to, like All India Institute of Local Self-Government, we are in a big way into capacity building. This is a chance for us to learn some things also. We need to make sure that when we teach people, when we train them, we need to add so many other aspects to the training also. What we have seen in the lockdown period and this thing, the psychological treatment, the entertainment part, but there are certain things like people have been locked down in Yamuna Sports Club, and the caretakers of the Yamuna Sports Club and the management do sing song for them and entertain them. Now that is not the part of their duty. They must have never been trained. It is the art they must have had there during the college days or the school days. But that is really, they have used it in some ways. We need to, as somebody said, we need to stay with the virus. This virus is not going to go so easily. And even if it goes, another edition is going to come. So many things are going to come. So as we have see, somebody also pointed out very rightly that we can't go against the nature. The more you fiddle with the nature, more such problems you are going to face. But in urbanization, we have no other choice, but we keep on fiddling with the nature. So we need to keep ourselves ready to fight such type of this thing. Now we talk of migration from cities to cities. I think again it was a coordination, lack of coordination between the state and the center. Center announced the lockdown and the states were not taken into confidence. Had state taken into confidence, state would have at least made some arrangement for this migrating laborers. The problem is that the government cannot give them a surety that this lockdown is for a limited period. They are not going to lose their job. They are going to continue that confidence people don't have. People, it's not only the people coming and flocking down and gathering in lakhs. You find everyday stories that people are walking for 500 kilometers, 600 kilometers, 800 kilometers, walking for 50, 20 days, 30 days, and reaching their place on road by foot. Now, this is what it shows. It is neither the employee, neither the employer. Both of them, they don't have a confidence and what is on their future, what is going to happen. So the government has to infuse something in the society that people should have faith in the government. People should have faith in the governance. No, if the government says that they will take care, they will take care. The Prime Minister making a request to everybody, please don't cut the salaries. Please don't remove the people. But is it happening? No, it is not happening. So people have lost some faith. They are very much worried about their future. So these are the more problems. These more problems are being seen in the cities. Another thing which I spoke to so many doctors and what I could gain, I'm not a medical expert, but what I find is that the lifestyle of city has to be, they have to take care of the lifestyle. See, Indore, in Madhya Pradesh, Bhopal for that matter, then come to Mumbai, Pune, Delhi, Ahmedabad, you find this corona issue at a very larger scale and a bigger scale in cities because of the lifestyle. I think the immunity has gone down compared to the villages. So many lakhs of people have migrated from Delhi to Uttar Pradesh. We have seen more than 1,000 buses were deployed to take them from Delhi border to their respective places. But we don't find so much of patients coming up from there. It is only a Lucknow that is gathering more numbers. So the immunity in villages, I think still it is better because still they are close to nature. So we need to tackle on that level also. It is not only that we talk of the mismanagement or we talk of the funds. There are certain management at our own level, personal management, the food habits, the lifestyle habits has to be taken care of. I personally feel. But in this also we need to learn so many things. I think the central government is also learning regularly. They are regularly now having coordination with the states. The Prime Minister is regularly taking meetings with the Chief Ministers, and the Chief Minister is also talking to the district level. And in disaster management, we always feel, when I have been seen, and Dhananjay, you yourself was an active journalist in the field, and so is the Abhishek. So whenever such disaster takes place, it's the bureaucracy which takes over, whether it's earthquake, flood, or cyclone. Now here also the bureaucracy has taken over everything, and the political leadership at the higher level might be ruling, but at the lower level, right from the state, except Chief Minister, all ministers and MLAs, they are toothless. They are with no idea and no focus what to do exactly. Similarly, when you talk of MLAs and the ministers, forget about the corporators and the mayors. Indore is known for the cleanliness. For last 3-4 years continuously, they have bagged the award at the national level, being the cleanest city in India. But what happens in Corona? That cleanliness has not helped because again, it is the city, it is the lifestyle of the city. You can keep the city clean, but you cannot develop your immunity. But another thing, what I have seen, the cities which are directly connected to the outside, means other countries, these problems are faced more there. Might be Indore is one of the, Indore collector has recently said, it is the Dubai that has gifted this virus to us. Similarly, in Mumbai also, Maharashtra also, it was the first batch of the 40 people coming from Dubai, which spread across Maharashtra. And today what we see, Maharashtra is Maharashtra. Similarly, Ahmedabad also is directly connected. Delhi, of course, we are a hub. So these are the things. Goa, rightly said, we were lucky, Dhananjay, that I think it was the last function which Goa hosted. And we were lucky to be a part of that. So after that, there are no more functions in Goa. But Goa, again, is an educated state. The education level is high. City is small. And that is the tourist place. They know how to accommodate people. And again, the lifestyle of Goa, if you see, you had been there for months. So the lifestyle is such that they're more close to nature rather than going against the nature. So these are some points we need to learn from this. This is an opportunity, God-given opportunity for a country like us. Today also we claim that we are at the best compared to other states in Europe. But again, we need to test people. The biggest problem what our country is facing, that 80% of the patient, you don't see symptoms in that. So that is a biggest risk. They may be a carrier, but the 20% which they affect, they are going to pay their life. So in that, the country with 135 crore of people, you need to see the casualties have to be minimum. So let us hope for the best. I'm really happy that such webinars are being organized, and we can share our more experiences, we can have more learning. And I think this is going to be a big thing for us to learn. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wankhede, for sharing your thoughts. And obviously, it's a big concern. It was flagged, red flagged by ICMR day before yesterday in the press conference, that the 80% of the cases that are being diagnosed in the last couple of days are basically asymptomatic, and they are the biggest virus because they don't know, they are socializing, they are going out, they are meeting people, and in the process, they are spreading the virus. So that is a big concern. I hope Mr. Abhilash Khandekar is back with us. Mr. Khandekar, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Sir, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So I was trying to say there were 3 points I was trying to raise, and now some of them have been covered by Mr. Ashok Wankhede. But I was saying that the demographic issues that we saw, that urban, the housing and jobs, etc., as far as COVID-19 is concerned, since the outbreak has already taken place and we know where are we standing now, Now the issue is about, if we see Ashok has taken names of certain cities, I would like to talk about Indore and Bhopal, where there were two different approaches and two different reasons for this kind of outbreak. In Indore, the initial testing was delayed, and after that some Jamatis also came in. Indore has huge Muslim populations, and still there are reports that the Muslim areas are not cooperating with the district administration. In Bhopal, unfortunately, there was no health minister in Madhya Pradesh, and the principal secretary in health, and there were large number of health department officials who were contracted with this infection, and therefore there were large number of patients reported from Bhopal. What about what Mr. Tikendra says is very important issue is that since we have been all along touting cities as the growth engines, the large number of migrations have happened in over a period of decades into Delhi or Hyderabad or Ahmedabad or Bombay. And I remember Mr. Sharad Pawar, the former chief minister, telling me that 3 train loads of job aspirants, those who are jobless people, coming into Mumbai from the Bimaru states of Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and UP. The point is that if the local administration or the local governments or state governments are not able to give education or jobs or create hospitals or schools, naturally this migratory trend will happen, which we are seeing all over the world. Now, is this the time post-COVID to look at our development model? So the point is that in the last 70 years, that rural development, in the name of rural development, the government of India spent huge amount of money, but where is the rural development? Why people are required to come to cities and settle down there, and suddenly when we are faced with a situation of COVID, people are running away from all the way from Bangalore to Rajasthan and from Delhi to other places. So here is an issue which needs discussion at the global level, whether we need to have these kind of cities or we should also develop the rural areas or the peri-urban areas from where people will have some kind of employment. The last point I am trying to make, because I have to make up for my time this thing, but in Indore there are large number of people, because that is the ground zero, and we are, Madhya Pradesh is, because of Indore and Bhopal, the third or fourth number. But the adjoining state of Chhattisgarh, if you see, there is not one single casualty. And next to that, Jharkhand has only 2. So this pattern has also, this pattern also needs to be studied, whether the smaller states, whether the backward states, whether the areas which are with tribals or which are areas with the rural population more than that are COVID prone, and only cities like Surat and Ahmedabad or Indore and Delhi, Bombay, from where a lot of people reportedly came from abroad and brought COVID-19 with them, and then it spread in the cities. Or these cities could be insulated through some kind of mechanism which we are still learning. So I am leaving at this point that while Goa, like Ashok said, Goa didn't have any single case. Why it was, in spite of the fact that there are a lot number of foreigners coming into Goa? Why Chhattisgarh has 0 casualty? Why Jharkhand could contain it only to 2? But why Jaipur was a major center of this kind of an infection? So the point is, while there was a lockdown, lockdown 2 is in force for the first time on 22nd of March, when Janata curfew was announced. Soon after the curfew was over, in Indore city like Indore, which is quite elite, quite educated, and it, as Ashok said, and I was also wanting to say that the cleanliness, it topped the tally for 3 years. But cleanliness and COVID don't have a direct relationship. Yet the spirit and the citizenship which was displayed during the Swachh Sarvekshan for the 3 years in Indore was completely absent during the lockdown period, and people came onto the road. And even today, the district administration in Indore is fighting with this kind of thing, because there is a very strict lockdown in Indore, yet people are coming onto the roads. But the fact remains, the other point that we also need to discuss here is that for how long can you keep people inside their houses? Because all the houses do not have multiple rooms, all the houses do not have the ACs, all the houses do not have drinking water. Most of the urban poor or most of the urban middle class is having in Indore, as far as Indore is concerned, and also in Bhopal to some extent. But in Indore, they are going without vegetables or milk and basic food, this thing in large colonies where urban middle class is living, and a lot of complaints are happening that the lockdown has not seen the practical difficulties of people. So is this the way the district administration should go about dealing with this? In Bhopal, the municipal corporation has done a wonderful job, and they are reaching out to all households with vegetables and other domestic needs. But is that the model other cities are also adopting? And what are the lessons that we are learning from Kerala, or what are the lessons we are learning from Bhilwara? Bhilwara lesson was that they swung into action very quickly, and lockdown was done, and home to home medical checkups were done in Bhilwara. But Bhilwara is a smaller town. This couldn't have happened in Bombay, or this couldn't have happened in Calcutta or Delhi. So now the point here is that after COVID-19, the world will not be same again. We will have to do number of new things like we are doing this webinar. But what are the challenges? Challenges for the urban managers, the city managers will have to be like that, because I am fearing that if 3rd May, if the lockdown is lifted, you may see a Bandra-like situation all over the country. Large number of people are, for various reasons, unable to stay inside. They have got their genuine reasons for not being able to be inside. There are older people, there are children, there are the people who are without any resources, there are people who are without food. Will they not come out on the streets? So will that be challenge for the police administration, district administration, political administration? How are we going to deal with that? This is my last post-COVID scenario that we need to discuss and try to understand as city managers and those who are understanding the urban governance, and how are we going to address. Thank you very much. Dhananjay?
Hello?
Yes, Dhananjay, can you listen to me?
Yeah, sure. Mr. Khandekar, thank you so much for speaking on this webinar. Though we have already crossed the time that we had set for the webinar, but still there are a couple of questions, and I would like to ask them. But I would like all the panelists to be really brief while answering these questions. So the first question that has come is that is there any correlation between development and virus spread? As we can see that the developed cities across the world and with better education and infrastructure are still not able to check the spread. It's open to every panelist. Anybody who would like to take this question?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I think I can talk about that. Yes, of course, development has a direct relation with all the pandemics because we have destroyed the nature. Actually, a major cause for this COVID is being said as wildlife trading, and the kind of damage that we have done to wildlife. And basically most of these viruses, they are said to be coming from deforestation and wildlife destruction. So I think development per se has actually destroyed a lot of the other habitats and kind of unknown, even at a point of time, even malaria, many new forms of malaria and other flu and other kind of viral diseases have come because we have destroyed the nature. So I think that is exactly we can say, and there are already studies have shown that COVID-19 is also sort of an outcome of destruction of nature.
Dhananjay, can I just here?
Hello. Now this question is directly addressed to Mr. Edgardo. This is from Mr. Ravi Ranjan Guru. He would like to know why the spread of corona in European cities are higher than the cities like Nepal, countries like Nepal and Bangladesh and other developing countries. Any reason or observation that you can throw some light on this?
This is still a debate. See, even in Europe, you have different spread of the COVID-19 is much more have a bigger impact on Spain, Italy overall, even France than in the northern countries. But now it's spreading very quickly in UK, for example. As you experiment also in Asia, there was a big expansion and in China, but less in Korea. It was contained in Korea, in Singapore, even in Singapore. You are now, they are now facing a second wave this week. The answer is not clear for us. There is still the first analysis was that the tourists and migration helped to disseminate the pandemic. But countries like Germany, where they have also facing migration and maybe less tourists than Spain or Italy or France, they have not been so much impacted. Then the answer is still not clear. We'll see what is. See, on the other side, the problem now that the pandemic is expanding in developing countries, in less developing countries like in Africa, or in some countries in Latin America. Then we need to continue to explore and to analyze the causes, the reasons. Thank you.
Dhananjay, can I just make a small point?
Yeah, please go ahead, but briefly.
Yeah, I actually don't want to contest what was just said just a short while ago regarding that if we are, and I'm quite a naturalist that way, and not really want to contest Ranjan Panda, but you said the point is that even if we are 100% naturalist, I'm quite a naturalist that way. That's not, I'm 100% advocate what he's saying. But we must remember the viruses have come before us, and they are a part of, and since I've been a student of genetics, I can tell you in my, though I faintly remember now anything about that, don't please poke me for that. But the point is, if we understand our transformation from inorganic to organic material, these viruses play a pivotal role. And don't forget, 90% of the mammals were gone before the human beings came into existence. So yes, there's no doubt that this doesn't give us an alibi to really plunder our nature or our natural resources. But even if we are 100% naturalists, to take this for granted that, look, such epidemics are not going to happen, I think I would be the last person to believe that. So what we require is to have more adaptation and mitigation strategies, because the way we are evolving, I think the viruses are also evolving. And let me also apprise you, maybe I just read this article by Bhadra Kumar yesterday only. It's not my creation. And he says the Chinese are really after the virus. They've found the father, they're going to find the grandfather and the great-grandfather of this virus very soon. So what does that mean? That means that actually there is a whole history trail to it. And to foresee, I mean, my only concern being a naturalist and being not a naturalist that way is whether there is a link between climate change and the evolution of these pandemics. I'm not sure about that, because there may be. I mean, I don't really want to contest that. But even with being 100% naturalists, we just cannot avoid this. That's all.
But Tikendra, there was an issue about development versus lack of development. So if you see certain states like Odisha, or if you see Chhattisgarh, if you see Jharkhand, if you see Goa for a different reason. But what are the reasons for developed cities to have attracted COVID in a much bigger way than
I think there's a
to that urbanization
No. I think there's a very interesting cartoon to that, and I'll refer to that cartoon. कि खता हुई passport की और सजा मिली ration card को.
Finish and then.
So I think we should not forget that. For that matter, I mean, you know, we have geographical boundaries also.
Yeah.
Shimla, there's not been a single case, because hardly people migrate outside. I mean, there are hardly people coming. And of course, it also relates to large-scale surveillance. Like, why did Kerala had for that instance large number of cases? Because, you know, large chunk of people stay in Gulf, and they are the ones who brought this virus back to India. I think
Kerala could control it.
put control. So that's the point. That's what I'm focusing upon. I think we have to make our adaptation and mitigation strategies resoundingly well.
Thank you, both of you. My next question is directed to, it's not my question, but the next question that has come is directed to Mr. Tikender. And the question is that how badly will the cities be affected with the departure of the migrant workers? Because in the context, particularly of the financial crisis that we are going to witness, or we are already in the midst of, how badly it is going to actually affect the economy?
I think, Dhananjay, it's not, I was of a very strong optimism. I told you, I just want to reiterate that in a very short note. And that is that I was very optimistic that the cities are going to bounce back, because where are the people going to go? They are going to come back. But after looking at what the CMI has done, the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, it's a really scary picture. If the people don't want to work, I mean, how do you instill that confidence? And that instilling that confidence doesn't just mean giving an economic stimulus, which of course it means, it is so important. But I think more important than that is, I mean, just to bring back the confidence of the people. Now, and I think many of our people, Ranjan has spoken about that, and many of the other panelists have spoken about that actually there's certain measures that have to be done. There's certain measures which are going to be very short term. For example, community kitchens, for example, say why can't we speak about like we have the Employment Guarantee Act for the countryside, rural. Why can't we have an Urban Employment Guarantee Act where we?
A question for our colleague from Barcelona. Once Tikender is completes his thing, so that is about wildlife. And Dhananjay, if you allow me, I would like to pose this question to our friend from Spain.
So I'm done. I don't want to add anything further to that. It's only that we wish, I mean, there's certain immediate measures that needs to be done. And for example, why can't we speak about the Urban Employment Guarantee Act? And I mean, we can really attract the imagination of the migrant workers. And actually people are required, you know, in urban centers if such an act is promulgated. And we've worked a lot on that. We've worked with Amity University, we've worked with lots of people. And we've actually, just before the elections, what could be the modalities and the logistics for implementing that act? Yeah.
Thank you, Tikender. We have already crossed the time limit, but we have a couple of minutes more. So I will allow 2 questions. Okay, Mr. Khandekar, you can ask your question to Mr. Eduardo.
Yes, Mr. Eduardo, the
question and answer both should be very brief. Thank you.
A very small question that there was a reference to wildlife. So there are certain issues which have been raised across the world about China using pangolin and bat as a mammal, both mammal, and because of that the virus has spread across the world. So is there anything that you would like to add from Spain about this thing, and some factual understanding about this, if you can, please?
I am not a specialist on that first, but what I read in the news is that this also is suspected as one of the possibilities that the exchange of pangolin or other importation of this kind of can contribute to the expansion of the virus. But I have not seen any concrete proof about that. This is one of the speculations.
Thank you. Dhananjay?
Hello.
Yes, Dhananjay.
Yeah, hello. Thank you. Okay, so we have time for one more question, and that goes to Mr. Souvik Datta from European Union. And the question is, how is European Union going to support Indian urban local bodies to support in response to this pandemic? Over to you, Souvik.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Just to mention that currently, as far as India is concerned, support to the local governments or urban local bodies is through the existing programs, and some of the blending projects that I spoke to you about, which is through AFD, which is the French Development Agency, and it's a bank basically. So most of the funding is through the agency. So through the Asian Development Bank, sorry, not Asian Development Bank, the French Development Agency. And the existing efforts in the urban local bodies is more through our existing programs. There are no new funding as such. This will be done only later in the year, and hopefully something will materialize, because we go through an elaborate process. So sometimes whatever has been planned in the next year will be brought forward to this year. So there are, EU is a very complex bureaucracy. So basically we have to go through the normal process, the rules and procedures, especially getting approvals from the remaining 27 countries. So I think it takes time, but something will materialize. Probably we will come to know in the later second half of the year as to what actually has materialized. So as of now, it is more on the existing programs that we'll be working in, and whatever the programs that we have currently. In the coming future, I cannot say right now because we don't have any information. But yes, as I said, in the Indian delegation is also working in Bhutan. So we have a program with the local governments out there, the 20 districts and the 205 geogs that we have out there. So we have already released through our funds around 4.5 million euros, and more 5.7 million euros are planned to be released in the coming few months. Thank you.
So thank you, Shobik, that, and I guess this was quite an interesting exchange of ideas, dialogue on the pandemic COVID-19. And we heard from our international experts who are working right now on the ground zero, also from journalists, from European Union, and from other fields as well. And we had a lot of participants in this webinar. This was, of course, the first in the series of webinars that we are going to have on the subject. We will be back with you next week, same on Thursday, same time, that is 11 a.m. in the morning. Our Twitter handle is Urban Update MGZN. You can also write to us at Urban Update Mag. Please keep giving your suggestions, the topic that you'd like us to talk about, and our panelists to answer those questions.
Dhananjay, also please tweet this today's webinar and links, etc. on your Twitter handle.
Yes, sure, sir. On Facebook, this was being streamed live. On Twitter, of course, we'll put the link.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let me thank once again all my speakers, Mr. Escardo Bilges from Spain, Abhilash Khandekar, Shobik Datta, Ravi Ranjan Guru, Mr. Ashok Wankhede, Ranjan Panda,
Thank you.
all my colleagues. Thank you. Thank you so much. See you next Thursday.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye. Stay safe, all of you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ravi.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you very much.